What's up, everybody? My name is Mike Howard. I'm the lead pastor here at Revision, and I am excited to be here this morning. How about you?
Yeah.
All right. Well, today's a great day to be at Revision. If you're here for the first time, welcome. You picked a good day to come. Last week was Reach Des Moines. We spread out all around the city, and we did some great things with some great nonprofits that are helping Des Moines flourish. It was awesome. So thank you so much to everyone who was able to be a part of that. But this morning, we're kicking off a brand new series called The Waymaker. And I'm pumped about what God is going to do in our hearts and in our lives over the course of the next month. Because I think what we're going to talk about is something everybody in this room, no matter who we are and what we've done and where we've been or where we find ourselves right now, needs to hear. And we need to hear it because it's easy in this broken world to find ourselves feeling like our backs are up against the wall. Like we're stuck and we don't know if there's any way out of the situation we're in. We don't know what to do or where to go from here. And in those moments, as we can feel like the last reservoirs of hope drying up inside our souls, we can't help but wonder whether God cares. Like if he even knows where we're at and he sees us and whether we can count on him and depend on him to deliver us. And over the next month, we're going to talk about the spaces we occupy when we feel abandoned, when we feel like we're tired of waiting, when we hit rock bottom, when we feel like there is no way forward. And we're going to see that when we find ourselves there, we're actually in a great spot to watch God move powerfully in our lives because he is the one who can make a way when there is no other way. He's the Waymaker. And the big idea of this series, the whole point isn't to give us a whole list of things we need to do if we find ourselves there. It's to remind us who God is when we find ourselves there. Because all of us have been in that spot and all of us are going to be there again. About 5 years ago, my wife and kids were out of town. I got a call from a buddy who asked if I could come over and help him real quick, which was kind of a bummer because it was a nice November Saturday and I had a great day lined up of eating pizza and watching sports. Hawkeye football and the Blackhawks were on back to back and I was like just sitting down for kickoff. But instead I ventured out into a 30-something degree Minneapolis day and decided I'll help him out, mostly because I didn't have a good excuse. When I got there, I realized that what I was helping him out with real quick was adding foam insulation to the bottom of his 3-season porch. His family just bought a house they were remodeling. The problem was there was only about 18 inches between his porch and the rocks below, and it was hard to get under there with a drill. And immediately I realized this is not a real quick project. So I tried to come up with like some injury I could fake, and I didn't. So 4 hours later, as I was lying on a bed of frigid rocks, looking up at the porch, thinking, it's probably too cold for a spider, but if they're out, I cannot even move. I'm just going to have a heart attack and die right here. This thought was coursing through my body. This is not where I want to be. How did I get here? Why am I right here? I would rather be anywhere other than right here. Any of you guys ever been in that spot? Just feel like, oh man, how did I get to this place where I am? I'd rather be anywhere else, and I don't know what to do. I just feel stuck. Most of us know what that's like. One thing I learned while I was under the porch that day is a good way to avoid those situations in your life is to ask what you're helping your friends with if they ever call. Here's the truth. If you have a friend who calls you up and asks you to help them and they don't give you the details, don't give them the benefit of the doubt. They're not assuming that unlike every other human person on the planet, you don't care about the details. They know if they gave you the details, you wouldn't show up. Okay, so just free life advice. Don't do it. If someone calls and asks you to help and doesn't tell you what with, just make up some excuse. I can see some of you're thinking right now, I'm going to call Mike this week and ask him to come help me. I'm not even going to tell him what for. I'm going to be so upset. I'll come over. I will. I'll get over it and I'll tell Jenny, I'm going to have the worst day of my life again. With what? I don't know. That's hard enough. It's going to be awful. But I'll come. And then a few months later, I will tell the story on a Sunday morning and point at you so everyone looks. I'm a sucker, but I'm a sucker with a microphone. So take advantage of me at your own risk. But for real, okay, it's one thing to get stuck on a freezing cold day, lying on rocks, helping your friend when you want to be inside watching sports. But for most of us, like when we find ourselves in that spot where our back's against the wall, we don't know how to move forward, and we'd rather be anywhere other than where we are, the stakes are a whole lot higher. We've been there, in the corner, feeling like there's just no way. Maybe you're there right now. Maybe it's your job, you hate it, your boss is a jerk, but you can't find a new job, or maybe you've been looking for a job for a really long time, and the money's going to run out soon, and you just don't know where or when or how God will provide. Maybe it's marriage. You've been fighting for it, but it's difficult, and you don't know how you're going to move forward in the same direction together. You feel like this is only going to work if both of us are committed, but I'm alone in this. I'm the only one willing to do the hard work. Or maybe it's this vision and picture of marriage, and you're sick of singleness, and you're frustrated with it, and you're waiting for it to finally be your turn. Maybe it's abuse. I know, I wish I didn't know, but I know that there are people in this room who have suffered physical and verbal abuse repeatedly, and maybe you don't know who to tell, or if anyone will believe you if you did, or how you can get out of it, or if you can even get out. Maybe it's your parents who are frustrating you. Maybe it's parenting. You got kids making rebellious decisions and you don't know how to help rather than hurting. Maybe you got a relationship or a friendship that's falling apart, a bully at school, a struggle at school, a financial situation where the numbers aren't adding up. You don't know how you're going to keep your house or where you're going to go. Maybe it's your health or the failing health of someone you love. But life has a way. Whatever it is, whatever it was, or whatever it will be, of just shoving our backs up against the wall, leaving us bruised and crushing our hope. And whether or not you've ever watched The Simpsons, I think everyone in this room can relate to Homer, at least in this particular moment of his life. We've been there. I know how that feels, and the good news this morning is that when you find yourself caught between a rock and a hard place, you got company. And not just Homer Simpson. Like, people have been there for thousands and thousands of years. And what we can do is look back at how God related to them and what God did in their lives while they were there to find out how God wants to move in our lives when we are there. So what we're going to do this morning is drop in on the nation of Israel when they're in a Homer Simpson moment. They're caught between a rock and a hard place. If you got Bibles, you can crack them open to Exodus chapter 14. It's the second book in the Bible, sandwiched between Genesis and Leviticus, and we're going to drop in on Israel in a place where there is no way forward for them unless the Waymaker shows up. And here's the background. They've been slaves, this whole nation, in the nation of Egypt, which is the most powerful nation on earth, for over 4 centuries. And then God sends Moses to tell Pharaoh, it's a Pharaoh named Thutmose, it's about 1500 BC. God sends Moses to Thutmose to say, hey, you need to let my people go. And Pharaoh says, no. And then over a course of plagues and days, God demonstrates his power until he breaks the will of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh finally says, fine, just go, get out of here. And they've just begun the journey when we drop in on them in Exodus 14. And this is what goes down, starting in verse 1. So the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. They are to encamp by the sea, directly opposite Baal-Zephon. Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around in the land of confusion, hemmed in by the desert. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites did this. Real quick time out. They basically just started the journey from slavery to the land God promised them. And then God gets together with Moses. He's like a coach calling Moses into the huddle. Calls me, he's like, all right, here's the play. Let's wander around in circles for a little bit. And then I want you to turn back and go like to that place you just passed. And get right up next to the big giant sea that you cannot possibly cross. And then Pharaoh's going to be like, they're lost already. And then he's going to come chase you, and I'm going to rile him up and make him real mad. He'll probably bring his whole army. So just to be clear, I want you to get the whole nation right between certain death by drowning and certain death by stabbing. Hand in. Ready? Go. I'll be straight with you guys. If I was Moses, I'd have had like a prayer moment. I'd be like, oh, dear Heavenly Father, come before you today. Just thank you for being good. And also, that is the dumbest plan I've ever heard. Are you kidding me? Why? But Moses does it. All right, they turn right back around and they camp out by the water. And there's something we got to see in that. Like as the Israelites find themselves on the banks of the Red Sea, knowing because God told them, Pharaoh's army is coming after you, they are not where they are by accident. It's not a mistake that they get left in that spot. And in your life, sometimes that's true too. It's not a mistake or an accident that you are where you are. God does this all the time, just like he did with Israel. And we need to realize that God intentionally leads us into situations where there is no way unless he makes a way. I'm going to say that again. God intentionally leads us into situations where the only way is for him to make a way. Why? He tells Moses, this is my glory. I'm going to put you right there, and I will get glory. And we need to understand what he's talking about, because we read that a few thousand years later in a different language, and we think, you don't have enough? You're going to mess with my life so you can get more glory? Time out. But that's not what God's saying here. He's saying, look, my love for you compels me to put you here because you need to know who I am. There are going to be some times along the journey in your life where things get rough. There are going to be some times where enemies come up against you, and you're going to need to know that you know that you know. You're going to need to be able to cling to my power and my glory and my love in that moment. I'm putting you there to teach you who I am. Because you're going to be tempted again and again to put your faith in lesser things. You're going to be tempted to let other emotions take over and run your life when it feels like hope is lost and there's no way forward. Because of that, I want to make it clear to you who I am. Make no mistake, God brings us to the shore because there are some things he needs to drown out there in the water so that hope and love can come alive deep inside our souls. As we look at the rest of this story, we're going to see what God intends to drown and what he wants to replace it with. All right, so Israel's camped out. In verse 5, Pharaoh does exactly what God said. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them. He said, what have we done? We let the Israelites go. We've lost their services. So he had his chariot made ready. He took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots, along with all the chariots of Egypt, with officers all over them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites, who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea, near Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-Zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified, and they cried out to the Lord. And they said to Moses, is it because there are no graves in Egypt you brought us out here in the desert to die? What have you done to us bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we send you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than die in the desert. Rewind. Pharaoh, right? He is sitting there and he's like, wait a minute. We can't just hire a new labor force. We didn't pay them. They're slaves. We're going to go get them back. At least that's what he told everybody. But this is more than just economic for Pharaoh. So understand, this is a guy who's been told since the day he was born that he is the living God on earth. That he's a deity. That he ought to be worshipped by his people and obeyed without question. And then here comes the God of the slave people, who's going to show up and tell him what to do, who's going to make demands, who's going to dare to upstage him by a show of power. Who does this God think he is? And in this moment, Pharaoh asks the same question that Beyonce asked in 2011. Who run the world? And he's about to get his showdown. He wants to know, it's either me or God. I'm going to show Israel and I'm going to show Egypt who's in charge of this thing. Make no mistake, Pharaoh is going out there to pick that fight. So that's where Pharaoh's at. He's pretty sure he's God and God is not God. And then you got the Israelites. You know what? They're pretty sure of the same thing. That Pharaoh's God and God's not. Because as soon as they see Pharaoh, they're like, oh, we knew it. Great. We're never going to beat him. We should have never listened to stupid Moses. We should have never followed God. God can't beat Pharaoh. Pharaoh's got the biggest army in the world. All of our what ifs. were true. I knew my what ifs were bigger than God. I should have followed my gut and just, stuck with fear. So sometimes when we end up on the beach, it's because God wants to drown our arrogance and replace it with awe. Like Pharaoh's arrogance was not just toxic for him, it was toxic for an entire nation that was coerced into worshiping a false god. And God makes it clear in his words to Moses what he's doing. That he has Israel on that beach, not just for Israel's sake, but because he wants to set Egypt free. It's like the Egyptians will know who is God. They'll know who's the one true God at the end of this. I'm going to set them free. And Israel, in their arrogance, is sitting there thinking, our plans are better than God's. What does God know? How in the world could God have left us in this terrible spot? This was such an awful idea. We should follow us instead of God. We do the same thing. Like, God, you know what? I'm going to have to fire you because this just doesn't look like what I want to do. And God knows that if they're ever going to make it from where they are to the place he has for them, if they're ever going to be transformed from who they are to the people he created to be, a light in the middle of a dark world, they need to know that his plans are trustworthy and not theirs. Their arrogance needs to drown. I think it's just easy. I look at my own life and I wish it wasn't true. But it's easy when things feel hopeless to just decide that God must be wrong. That this isn't the place that he meant for us. You're like, oh man, my life before God was better than this. This is just not at all what I wanted. This is not at all what I planned. But sometimes you have to pass by your plans to get to God's purpose. You gotta let him drown your arrogance and fill it with just awe of who he is and how he moves and what he can do and how much he loves, if you're ever gonna get to the place that he has for you. But our arrogance isn't the only thing God intends to drown. A couple minutes ago, you may have noticed that I read the Israelites in a whiny voice. During us here to die, we liked being slaves. And I'm kind of good at that because I have 4 kids. I hear it every day. And that's just Jenny talking to me about the kids. I don't even get into them. But no, here they are, and they're whining. It's exactly what they sound like. And also they're full of garbage. They never said any of that to Moses. When Moses said, hey, I'm going to set you free, they threw a party and they worshiped God. They weren't like, oh, I'll be set free from slavery. No, I like it. It's fun. I'll stay. That's not what they did. And it's easy to make fun of them a few thousand years later, but in fairness to them, I would have done the exact same thing if I was in that situation. I mean, just picture it. Here they are. They're like on the banks of this big sea. They can't even see the other bank. And then they turn around, and the first thing you do is see it. When Pharaoh's army moves, there's a dust cloud on the horizon. So they see the dust, and the next thing you do, before you can even hear it, is you feel it. These are heavy armored chariots full of soldiers, and shook the ground. When Pharaoh's army marched, it created a mini earthquake. So you can see it coming, and you can feel the ground shaking, and then you can hear your enemies coming after you. What would you do? Panic. Just completely panic. And that's exactly what they did. They're looking at their situation like, to the east is certain death. To the west is certain death. It's a really fun would you rather question. Like, would you rather have your lungs filled up with water or have your lungs filled up with a pointy metal spear? There's literally no way. Except the Waymaker. Like sometimes when we're on the shore, it's because God wants to drown our panic and replace it with provision. Check out how Moses responds to the people in verse 13. They're freaking out. And Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. That's a beautiful verse, isn't it? The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. See that verse on Instagram and on artwork. I'm guilty. I have a little note card that says it right on my dresser. Like, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. We love that verse. It's also one of the most misapplied verses in the entire Bible. We love to rip it right out of Exodus 14 like it wasn't part of his story and be like, oh, sweet, if I just sit here and do nothing, then God will fight for me. That is going to be phenomenal. And it's a great thing to believe if verse 15 doesn't happen. But then it does. Verse 14, Moses is like, hey, everybody, God will fight for you. Just be still. And then in verse 15, God has some thoughts on that. Then the Lord said to Moses, what are you talking about? Tell him to move. Raise your staff. Stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. You're going to split the Red Sea in two, bro. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. I will gain the glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. I love that. Because here's the Israelites, and they're like, what can we do? We're panicked. We don't even know where to go. And Moses is like, don't worry, just be still. And God's like, no, go. I got a whole plan to save you, but it doesn't work on the west side of the Red Sea. It only works in the middle. It's not going to work on the beach. It's only going to work between the walls of water. And don't hear me saying that if they didn't move or if they went in the wrong direction, God wouldn't still have saved them, or that he couldn't. Or that in any way they were responsible, or that they helped. But there's something we need to see in God's response to Moses. He's like, what are you talking about? No, go. Faith is active. Fear is passive. So often in our lives, fear just cripples us. It locks us up in this prison, and we don't want to move, and we just want to cling to, like, if I just lean in heavy to this fear and don't move, then that'll be good. Faith isn't sitting still. Faith is active. Faith is moving forward, following the voice of God. Always. And I think when we get overcome by fear, especially like when life is tough and it's difficult, we just let it imprison us and cause us to live passive lives. And then we dress it up and we take our passivity and we label it patience, like it's a spiritual virtue. And we just sit there. Like, I've been looking for this job for a long time, but I don't want to step on God's toes, so I'm not putting out resumes or anything. I just watch Price is Right again, and then hope he fights for me. Stop it. Don't get me wrong, he is fighting for us always, always. And fear is a very real part of life in a shattered world, and that's okay, but don't let it win. Like when the panic wells up and the waves feel like they're crashing all around you, follow the voice of God into the deep water, because he's about to do something big. Even if you don't know what it is, and even if you can't see where he's leading, follow him. You do the believing, and he will do the achieving. Every time, I promise. If he can cut a highway through the Red Sea, he can make a way that you can't see. And cut a highway is exactly what he did. Verse 21, read the rest of the story. It says that Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. When the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and Moses, his servant. The Waymaker made a way. It's crazy, though, to think about that and try and put yourself in the shoes, or the sandals, probably to be more accurate, but the sandals of one of these Israelites walking through the Red Sea. Like, I so wish this wasn't true of me, and I could pretend that I have like just big unshakable faith. But I know if I was one of them, I would not have believed the plan was going to work until I saw the dead bodies washing up on shore. Like I'd have been right there in the middle, looking up at just the waves towering over me, thinking, man, if God is like holding up the water, how can he fight the Egyptians at the same time? This is not where I want to be. This is the last place I would rather be anywhere other than here. I'm sure a whole lot of them are thinking the same thing. But sometimes when we find ourselves between an army and a Red Sea, it's because God wants to drown our doubt and replace it with dependence. This may sound like the craziest thing ever, but I'm convinced that God's love compelled him to put his people right in that exact spot. Because he knew the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. They were going to need to know, like deep down at the core of who they were, know that he was powerful and faithful to provide, and they could depend on him. I think so many of us want to live with that kind of confidence. But we'd rather skip the journey across the Red Sea that gets us there. We'd love to drown our doubts and replace them with dependence, but we kind of want to do that without ever being in a spot where we have to depend for a lack of any other options. We know what God promised us, and we know what the end looks like, and we want to skip straight from the promise to the party because we are not convinced somewhere inside our souls that in the middle, on the journey, God will be who he promised he'll be, and he'll do what he tells us he'll do. See, there's a problem with living our lives like that. We can never learn that God is sufficient if we never have a need. And I know there's drama involved sometimes. And it gets intense when God ratchets up the drama. There might be drama in your life right now. There's certainly drama in Exodus chapter 14. But you know what? God created us to live epic stories. And the greater the drama, the greater the glory. The more hopeless your situation, the more incredible it is when God makes a way. If he puts you in a place where there is no way unless he makes a way, then you're never going to be in a space where you can be like, well, maybe God did that, but I had a cousin that did that one time. It's just not how it works. You know what? Every great story deals with adversity. Like every epic story does. All of them. Name one movie you like and would watch again that has no bad guys and no broken moments. Oh, wait. We love to watch, we love to hear about, we love to read about these people who crossed the Red Seas that are in front of them when their lives seem hopeless. But when it comes to our lives, we would prefer if God would act way less like the God of Exodus 14 and way more like Simon and Garfunkel. Like a bridge over troubled water. God's like, bridge, you're going straight through with an army chasing you because you need to know who I am, that I'm powerful, that I'm in charge, that I will provide, and that I love you. We need to know it because that makes all the difference when life gets tough. Man, I can tell you that from personal experience. 4 years ago last week, God made it clear to me that I needed to walk away from a thriving ministry and a pretty good job offer. That I needed to walk away from an offer to plant a church in Minnesota where we had money and people from a bunch of different churches and coaching and come to Des Moines. And 3 years ago this week, my family had lived in Iowa for 2 months and the Revision bank account had $0 in it. And for some weird reason, U.S. Bank Home Mortgage kept wanting me to pay them for the house that I was living in, but Revision didn't have any money to pay me in July or in August. And we had less than half of the people we got told never start a church with less than 50 people. And right at the same time, my brother-in-law was planting the church, and the school came to him and was like, hey, we're building a $7 million auditorium. You want to do church in there? Here we are without air conditioning. Again. So again and again and again. Here we are without air conditioning. And I just if I look back, man, my doubts were drowned and replaced with dependence. God's doing a thing. I'm blown away by what God has done over the last 3 years here in this church, this community of people who's just committed to getting together and helping people in our city meet Jesus and follow him fully. It's only God. Only God. But why this way? Why no money? Why no air? Why? I'm a bald preacher, man. I'm flop sweating here. You can probably tell. Why? Because the greater the drama, the greater his glory. He's doing a thing. The hard way is his way, because we're going to know from this day, from day one until forever, that God is doing a thing. And I'm convinced he wants to work that exact same way in your life and in mine. When you find yourself in a place where there is certain death on either side, caught between an army and a Red Sea where there is no way, remember who he is. He is the Waymaker. He made a way at the Red Sea, and he made a way at the cross. Like the Red Sea was just literary foreshadowing. God's like, oh man, you think that was cool? You think that was cool? That's just like a picture of what I'm about to do. See, Israel was enslaved, and it looked like they couldn't be saved, and I cut a path for them, but the whole world is enslaved to sin. Because of my profound love, because I'm the Waymaker, I'm going to step out of eternity into history and give my life to make a way. Through death and through sin and through tragedy and through brokenness, so that you can be reconciled to God. Man, that's the good news of the gospel, and it's free to all of us today. I don't care who you are or what you've done. You don't have to tell yourself anymore that you're too far gone. The Waymaker made a way. It's what he does. Like life in a broken world is never easy, but when we let God replace our arrogance with awe, and our panic with provision, and our doubt with dependence, when we remember who he is in the middle of our hardest times, it changes everything. He's the Waymaker. He made a way at the cross for the whole human race. He can make a way out of your situation, no matter what it is. You guys pray with me? God, thank you. Thank you for your love. Thank you for making a way. In all these spaces where life gets tough and the world beats us down and it feels like there's no possible way forward, would you just remind us who you are? How you love? Would you replace in us all the fear and all the panic with just a deep sense of your love and your provision and your power and your glory? We love you. Thank you for not abandoning us to the brokenness that surrounds us, but for making a way. In Jesus' name, amen.